Good day, legends. Picture this: you're at the supermarket and your weekly groceries just jumped 60% overnight. Brutal, right? Well, that's exactly what happened to offshore wind energy in the UK, and if Chris Bowen's got his way, we might be in for our own renewable reality check. I'm here with Australian News CC, and today we're diving into why Britain's green energy price explosion should have every Australian paying attention. But before we start, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next in Australian politics. So let's talk about this absolute shocker from across the pond. The UK just witnessed offshore wind prices skyrocket by nearly 60% in their latest auction round. To put that in perspective, imagine if your morning flat white suddenly cost you $12 instead of $8. That's not inflation, that's economic whiplash. And here's the kicker: this isn't some random market hiccup. This is the same renewable technology that Chris Bowen and the Albanese government are betting Australia's entire energy future on. Now, you might be thinking, but surely Australia's different, right? Well, hold on to your acubras because the warning signs are flashing brighter than a bushfire beacon. The UK was supposed to be the poster child for offshore wind success. They've got more turbines spinning in their waters than a toddler with a fidget spinner collection. Yet here they are, watching their green dreams turn into fiscal nightmares faster than you can say energy transition. But wait, it gets better. While British taxpayers are getting walloped by renewable reality, we've got an unelected UN climate chief, and get this, he's from Grenada, jetting around the world telling Australians that fresh fruit and vegetables might become a once-a-year treat unless we dramatically ramp up our emissions targets. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a renewable-powered knife. This bloke's probably clocked more air miles than a Qantas pilot, lecturing us about carbon footprints while his own would make Bigfoot jealous. Here's where things get really spicy. This same UN official is predicting a whopping $6.8 trillion GDP loss by 2050 if we don't play ball with their climate agenda. That's trillion with a T, folks. To put that in perspective, that's more than 30 times our entire annual federal budget. But here's the million-dollar question, or should I say, the trillion-dollar question: where exactly are these numbers coming from? Because if the UK's offshore wind pricing disaster has taught us anything, it's that green energy predictions have about as much accuracy as a weather forecast for next Christmas. Speaking of predictions gone wrong, let's circle back to our British friends for a moment. They were told offshore wind would deliver cheap, reliable energy. The reality? Costs have exploded faster than a firework on Australia Day. The latest auction round saw companies demanding strike prices that would make your electricity bill look like pocket change. We're talking about energy costs that could turn your air conditioner into a luxury item and your morning coffee into a financial decision. Now, here's where it gets really interesting for us Aussies. Next month, the Albanese government is expected to lock in its 2035 emissions target, and rumour has it we're looking at cuts between 65 and 75% compared to 2005 levels. That's not just ambitious, that's economically Olympic-level pole vaulting. This target will dwarf the already eye-watering 43% reduction we're supposed to hit by 2030. But here's the thing, and this is where it gets really cheeky: this isn't about what Australians actually want or need. Let me paint you a picture of what's really happening here. The Climate Change Authority, chaired by former NSW Liberal MP Matt Kean, is about to hand down advice that could reshape Australia's entire economy. But this isn't driven by public demand or even economic sense. This is Australia desperately trying to impress international delegates ahead of our COP31 hosting bid. It's like spending your life savings on designer clothes for a job interview at a company that's already decided to hire someone else. Think about it: we're potentially about to sacrifice our economic future for climate kudos from the same international community that can't even get their own renewable energy costs under control. The UK was the golden child of offshore wind, and look how that turned out. Their energy companies are now demanding prices that would make a Sydney real estate agent blush. But here's what really gets my blood boiling, and this should make yours boil too. Chris Bowen keeps promising Australians that renewable energy will bring down power prices. Yet every single piece of evidence from around the world suggests the exact opposite. Germany's got some of the highest electricity prices in Europe thanks to their green transition. California's residents are paying through the nose for unreliable renewable power that can't even keep the lights on during heat waves. And now the UK, the supposed success story, is watching their offshore wind costs explode like a poorly planned fireworks display. Meanwhile, what's happening to Australian families right now? Your power bills are already through the roof. Small businesses are closing down because they can't afford their electricity costs. Pensioners are choosing between heating and eating. And Bowen's solution? Double down on the same failed policies that are destroying energy affordability across the Western world. Here's the really infuriating part: Australia has some of the world's largest coal and gas reserves. We're sitting on centuries' worth of reliable, affordable energy. Countries around the world are literally begging us to send them our resources because they know how valuable they are. Yet we're being told to abandon this competitive advantage for unproven technology that's failing everywhere it's been tried at scale. And speaking of scale, let's talk about what this UK price explosion really means for Australia's plans. The Albanese government wants to build offshore wind farms along our coastline. These aren't small projects, we're talking about industrial-scale installations that will dwarf anything we've seen before. If the UK, with all their experience and head start, can't make the economics work, what makes anyone think Australia will be different? The numbers are absolutely staggering. The UK's latest offshore wind auction saw companies demanding strike prices of up to £73 per megawatt-hour. That's nearly 60% higher than previous rounds. For context, that's like your local servo suddenly charging you $2.40 for a litre of petrol when it was $1.50 last month. Except this isn't just affecting your weekend drive, this is the foundation of an entire energy system. But here's where it gets even more outrageous. These aren't market prices, these are government-guaranteed prices that British taxpayers will be forced to pay for decades. The UK government essentially wrote a blank check to renewable energy companies, promising to pay whatever they demanded for offshore wind power. And guess what? The companies took that deal and ran with it like they just won the lottery. Now imagine if the Australian government made the same promises to renewable energy companies here. Because that's exactly what they are planning to do. The Capacity Investment Scheme, Renewable Energy Zones, Transmission Infrastructure Guarantees, it's all code for taxpayers will pick up the tab no matter how expensive this gets. And here's the kicker that should make every Australian absolutely furious: while we're being told to accept higher energy costs for the sake of the planet, countries like China are building new coal power plants faster than we can say net zero. India's doing the same thing. Even Germany is firing up coal plants when their renewables can't meet demand. So we're voluntarily handicapping our own economy while our competitors laugh all the way to the bank. This brings us to perhaps the most outrageous aspect of this whole charade. The very same UN officials demanding Australia/emissions are representatives of countries that have barely any emissions to cut in the first place. This Grenadian climate chief telling us to sacrifice our standard of living. His entire country produces less CO2 in a year than a single Australian coal mine produces in a week. Yet somehow he's qualified to lecture us about economic policy. The whole thing stinks of international virtue signaling at the expense of Australian workers and families. We're being guilted into economic suicide by people who have never had to choose between paying their electricity bill and putting food on the table. But let's get back to Chris Bowen for a moment, because this is where the political rubber meets the road. Bowen's entire reputation is staked on this renewable transition. His promised cheaper power, reliable energy, and green jobs. Yet everywhere we look around the world, these promises are falling flat. The UK's offshore wind price explosion is just the latest example of renewable reality crashing into renewable rhetoric. How long before Australian voters start asking the hard questions? How long before small business owners who can't afford their power bills start demanding answers? How long before families struggling with cost of living pressures realize they are being asked to pay even more for energy that's supposed to be getting cheaper? The writing's on the wall, and it's written in big, bold letters. The UK's offshore wind disaster should be a wake-up call for every Australian politician pushing renewable energy at any cost. But instead of learning from Britain's mistakes, our government seems determined to repeat them on an even grander scale. This is why the next federal election could be absolutely crucial for Australia's energy future. We're at a crossroads where we can either learn from the UK's expensive mistakes or blindly follow them over the economic cliff. The choice should be obvious, but somehow it's not to the people making the decisions in Canberra. What makes this even more frustrating is that Australia has alternatives. We don't have to choose between reliable energy and environmental responsibility. Modern clean coal technology, natural gas with carbon capture, nuclear power. There are proven technologies that can deliver both affordability and lower emissions. But these options are being dismissed out of hand in favor of trendy but unreliable renewables. The UK thought they were leading the world with their offshore wind ambitions. Instead, they've become a cautionary tale about what happens when ideology trumps economics in energy policy. Their 60% price jump isn't just a number, it represents real families facing impossible choices, real businesses closing their doors, and a real economy being sacrificed on the altar of climate activism. So here's my challenge to you, legends. Don't let Australia become the next UK. Don't let Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese gamble your family's financial future on unproven technology that's failing everywhere it's tried. Make your voice heard. Contact your local members. Share this video with everyone you know. Because if we don't speak up now, we'll all be paying the price later. The UK's offshore wind price explosion should be front-page news in every Australian newspaper. It should be the lead story on every current affairs programme. It should be the subject of urgent parliamentary inquiries. Instead, it's being quietly ignored by a media and political class that's too invested in the renewable narrative to admit they might be wrong. But the facts don't lie, even when politicians do. A 60% price increase in offshore wind is economic reality crashing into green fantasy. And unless we change course fast, Australia's energy future could be heading for the same expensive disaster. The time for polite debate is over. The time for hoping our politicians will see sense has passed. The UK's offshore wind catastrophe is a 5-alarm warning for Australia, and we ignore it at our peril. Because when your electricity bill doubles, when your business can't compete, when your standard of living collapses, that's not just statistics. That's your life, your family, your future being sacrificed for someone else's ideology. Don't let it happen. The UK's mistake doesn't have to become Australia's tragedy, but only if we act now, speak up now, and demand better from our leaders before it's too late. Because once these policies are locked in, once these contracts are signed, once these targets are set, we'll all be living with the consequences for decades to come. That's all for today, legends. If this video opened your eyes to what's really happening with Australia's energy policy, smash that like button, subscribe for more hard-hitting analysis, and share this with everyone who needs to hear the truth. Because the mainstream media won't tell you this story, but someone has to. Until next time, keep fighting for Australia's future. If you thought tonight's story was wild, trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. So don't stop now. Click on the video right here on your screen to continue the chaos, the drama, and the inside scoop only we deliver. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and join the Australian News CC family where the real stories come to life. See you in the next one.